Thank you so much and welcome to this new season of i3 webinars. We are officially back. So we begin this new session of i3 webinars with laboratory management and how we can efficiently and safely monitor lab conditions, equipment, consumables, and staff. And the question here is, can we harness digital technology to better manage quality control, compliance, and workload? I'm Joy, co-host with Eros Nikitos, a colleague which I know very well from the high-tech and fabulously named Institute of Life, IASO, in Athens. And he is the lab director of the biggest clinic in Greece. I am also joined with Dr. Lodovico Parmegiani, also known as Lodo, and he's the head of embryology for Next Clinics International. So welcome. He describes himself as a very curious embryologist with a passion for cryobiology, and Edel Rocher, scientific product expert at IMT Matcher, with years of experience of working in clinical embryology.
Thank you for this intro. Thank you very much, particularly because I was introduced together with Eros, who was my student, and then it is my guide now, because every time I need anything, I ask to him. So now we know that Michelle is a registered nurse and certified specialist in human reproduction medicine, dedicated patient and client advocate with strong background in customer support and sales processes. She is client manager for IVF 2.0 and lives and works in Mexico.
Hello from Athens, Greece. I'm Eros Nikitos. I'm thrilled to be part of this special i3 meeting tonight. Special thanks to my dear friend Giles Palmer for this kind invitation, and a big hug to my mentor Lodo. We will keep the bio short to get as much out of the webinar, but you will find this and all the i3 webinars on the ivfmeeting.com. Remember, certificates are posted in a few days, not immediate. Tonight, we ask you to place all your questions in the Q&A section and not on the chat section. Please don't forget to take part in the discussions at the end.
Thank you so much, Eros. So let's get started, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here today, and I would like to introduce the first speaker, which is the one and only Gianfrancesco. And as laboratory QA and QC director, she's the responsible for the management of the quality assurance program for the Prelude network of art labs. Gian works to define and standardize laboratory best practices and SOPs, and collaborates with lab directors of the lab steering committee to implement quality standards. This talk is kindly sponsored by IBF QC and the Reflections QC app. So welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Popwell. And again, I'm the Laboratory QA Director for Inception Fertility. Today, I wanted to start us off by giving a basic talk about the monitoring of critical and non-critical equipment in the IVF laboratory. So why do we monitor equipment? Currently, the College of American Pathologists, or CAP as we know it, require a daily QC check of specific equipment. This ensures proper equipment function, ensures safety and integrity of gametes, embryos, sperm, serum, ensures integrity of our consumables, like our VIT and warming kits, and ensures sample integrity for PGT testing. But they only require one daily QC check. My question to you today is this enough? What are we possibly missing in the laboratory? Laboratory equipment monitoring. What equipment do we monitor in the IVF lab? So we monitor both critical and non-critical equipment. Some of the equipment that we monitor as a network are dewars and cryo tanks, incubators, refrigerators, freezers, room humidity and temperature, and then non-critically workbenches, warmers, and water baths. We're lucky to have set up a central monitoring command center, so we call it the CMCC. This provides an overall surveillance of the network labs. We are able to observe alert notifications, statuses, and responses for all laboratories, everything that has a probe or a camera system. We are able to ensure overall monitoring system integrity. So if someone's missing an alarm or not responding to alarm in a certain situation, we're able to notify them and ask them what's going on in the lab. And we can also see what's also going on in the lab through the thermographic camera. So this is what the system looks like here on this slide picture. So the two dashboards for the two systems. And just like everybody else, each laboratory also monitors their own critical and non-critical equipment daily. So most labs perform routine quality control checks daily. We all utilize a Reflections app for QC reporting. We took advantage of the integration that was created between Reflections and our probe alert monitoring system to import equipment temperature data into our daily reflection logs. And we have found that this is saving us up to an hour to an hour 0.5 hours of QC data entry per day in our medium to large size data labs. So whereas you had 2 or 3 staff members coming in early to do this QC measurements, now, with the push of a button, you're able to complete your reflections logs. And I'm going to show you how this is done. So on this slide here, you see that we have our alert monitoring system. And so here we're going to just check in on that dashboard for the alert monitoring system. This automatically sends the data to Reflections, and Reflections, once you set up this integration, you will have an import auto values button here. And once you push this button, your values that come from whatever system you've integrated with, so whatever probe system you have as far as your tank probes, incubator probes, you name it, all of that data gets automatically imported into your reflection logs for today. So you see here for incubator 3, the auto value that was imported was 36.81. And so this is saving you so much time. And depending on how many probes and how much integration you have, you can get these logs completed daily. And most of our labs have, like I say, all of the critical equipment integrated. So a lot of these are mostly green, and they might have 1 or 2 manual checks to still make where they don't have probes for certain pieces of equipment, but it is saving us so much time, and we're so very happy to have this type of feature available. The other thing that we set up for our network was redundant lab monitoring. So the thermographic camera monitoring unit is also interfaced with our alert monitoring system dashboard, which allows a central monitoring and alert system for our lab staff. So what I mean by that is that our thermographic camera system actually does send alerts to the user and has its own alert acknowledgement and corrective action that's needed by the lab staff. But it also sends an alert to the probe alert dashboard. So that system is also loaded on this dashboard, which also will then send an alert to the user, and the user can then see that alert, acknowledge, do any corrective actions, and document that corrective action and close the alert. So you have a dual system of not missing any kind of alert, whether it comes from the thermographic camera system or it comes from the actual probe system. So again, 2 different ways to get your alerts sent to you. The probe system handles our dewars and tanks, incubators, refrigerators, freezers, room humidity and temperature, oxygen sensors, workbenches, warmers, and water baths, whereas the thermographic camera system handles the dewars and the tanks. What does this look like? So again, most of our labs have the smaller dewars. Some do have the large stainless steel tanks, but we do have the small dewars in most labs. And as you see here, they are all set up in their storage. They have the probe systems located inside of them. Some lab directors, supervisors have done a good job and put pretty much a easy number on top, which has been really great, because with the thermographic camera, whatever you put on the top or the side of the tank, it really does show up with the thermographic camera. So if you were to see a tank that had a super dark black color and it maybe had an 18 on top, you would automatically know, okay, that's 18 in a corner. That's, you know, even though you're going to get an alert system for everything, you'd know exactly which tank that is. These are not the same rooms, obviously, but this is what the probe system looks like, very nicely installed for this room. And then this is another room that shows the thermographic camera setup. And again, here is the minimum temperature of 19.9 for all of the points here. And again, if anything goes below 15 surface temperature of these tanks, you're going to get an alarm, and it completely does the surveillance of this entire room 24 hours a day. Plus, again, like I say, you have live video. So you have this video feed and you have a video feed that looks just like this that's also being captured without the thermographic. So that's the advantage of having both of those systems. So again, the specs, daily check-ins, current status and temperatures, alerts, trends, which is what I'm going to show you and talk about for the rest of this talk with you guys, reports. And of course, cloud-based is what our probe system is, the thermographic camera system. Again, the live room footage is a huge plus because, again, you can kind of see what's always going on in your tank storage room, whether someone's filling tanks or moving samples, doing inventory or whatever, or if there's something you just want to play back, or if you see just an alarm go off, you can instantly look at the camera and know what's going on there. And again, alerts, trends, video playback, and is cloud-based. Okay, for dewars and cryo tanks, you know, normally these temperatures are stable. You know, negative 196 is what we're going to see. You know, CAP doesn't require you take daily temperatures of these equipment because of that. They do require a daily check of the outside integrity of the tanks, you know, cracks. We look for all of those dents or scrapes or anything that looks like it's physically being compromised. But what else could you be missing? Well, the thermographic camera system indicates silent shifts in surface temperatures, which would indicate a possible vacuum failure. So again, if you recall that picture I showed you, that dark purple, once you see a tank that looks closer to a very dark black blue, that is a possible indication of a vacuum failure about to happen. That outside of that tank is starting to cool. So if you see something like that, even before the alert comes off, if you see something like that, you can move frozen samples into your backup dewar. You can retire that equipment. And of course, I encourage all of you guys to still do your liquid nitrogen level checks. CAP requires 3 times a week. And then we have a policy for retiring dewars equipment at 10 years of age, and then also based on evaporation rates, we also retire dewars. So here's a graph of a tank, and you'll see here that there is a little small red indicator here that shows that it was above alert, at least at that time period on this day. And here's that little section here. So this is a Friday. You know, when I see something like this, I go, okay, well, it was in range most days. I mean, again, most of our tanks here sit at minus 196. And there's this spike. So what does this mean? And it was above the actual set alert for 30 minutes. So to me, that says that, you know, possibly this tank was being filled, and or they pulled the probe up to maybe check it as a probe check on Fridays. Fridays are tank fill days for most of us in this industry, alert check days. So you can look in a log and see why that alert went off. You can also check your thermographic camera footage and know why that alarm went off. So it's great to have these graphs because they indicate events or sometimes shifts. So that one is okay as long as you can find out why that was out for 30 minutes, what they were checking. Incubators. So there's 2 alert types that you're going to get. You can have the incubator alarms that just go off the incubator alarms, and not just going to set off the probe system and let you know the incubator's alarming. And we know incubators can alarm because they need water, or maybe the door is open, or if something else is going on. And then obviously for the probe system, it's going to be alarming because it's an out of range temperature. So again, mostly stable until the doors are open, but you still want to watch for trends for recovery. And this is just how some of the incubators are set up with the probe system. Here's a chart, again, showing mostly green. All the temperatures are in range. So you think, okay, everything is fine. You take a closer look, and you say, okay, the temperature is oscillating between 36.56 and 36.62, which is still great. I mean, as embryologists, you're like, okay, that's a workable temperature. We have no problems with that. So it's fine. You look at that, that's great. This, however, is not so fine, and you would never see this. If you come in and you did one measurement at, like, let's say 8 o'clock, you're going to be like, oh, okay, that's hitting 37. Perfect. That incubator is working. That's the right temperature. But no, 24 hours monitoring says this incubator is a little erratic. What is going on? It's above the alert for 25 minutes. It was below the alert for 10 minutes. And what the heck is this below the alert spike? No one knows what happened here. Why did it go all the way down to 34.5? And what are all these spikes? So, looking at something for 24 hours in a graph like this really tells you a lot about what might be happening with your equipment that is hidden to you. You just would never know with just one measurement, and that's what I'm hoping to convince you of today. Refrigerators and freezers, again, somewhat stable temperatures, but they do cycle. The cycling should be tight like this one, around 4 degrees. This one's really tight, and that's perfectly fine. You'll hear a refrigerator go on and off repeatedly throughout the day, but you do want to watch out for excessive door openings and other open door events, and watch for the recovery of that. Some big events that will kind of throw off your temperature are the addition of new room temp inventory. So all of us get those new bit and warming kits, and we just put them all in. We'll get 50 bottles of media. We'll put all of that in, and I'll literally open boxes and boxes of media, and I mean all at one time. And I've really never thought to myself, what is this doing to the refrigerator temperature? Is the refrigerator able to handle all of this? And when you look at 24-hour monitoring, maybe not. So you want to be careful with how much you have to put in there, or maybe look at the size of your refrigerator. Maybe you need 2 refrigerators. Maybe there's a way to cool some of that before you put it in the refrigerator. But you don't want to tax your equipment, or have your equipment sit at such a higher temperature longer than you think it's sitting at that. So for instance, here's your refrigerator. And this one's having some major issues. I mean, there's alarms, these little white areas where there are alarms actually going off. So the embryologist had to actually come and answer these alarms. And then these little light blue areas are where it's below caution. The fact that this incubator's widely cycling, this refrigerator is widely cycling and basically hitting the below 1 degree is very troubling. And the time that it's sitting there, I mean, it's sitting a total of 2 hours, going back and forth between 1 and looks like 7. So this refrigerator, I probably would, after looking at this graph, retire it, or just move all of my media and kits out of it, and try to purchase another one very, very quickly. Same thing with this freezer. This freezer never alarmed. It's sitting nicely at the, little orange, which is, above caution, but not enough to make this alarm. So, did the embryologist ever have to respond to alarm? No. But it spent 23 hours above caution. I mean, so it's sitting at -17. Again, unless you have charts and graphs and you're able to look at something more than just once a day, you're never going to know this. I mean, this, however, this one, luckily, they should have known, because there's a caution here that even with this one 5-minute measurement, it was at -12, and so that's above, it's above the set point that you want to reach, the range you want. It's not enough to alarm, but it's definitely not performing where you should. And even like this little small graph shows it, this line being really high on this mini graph. Luckily, this lab, this is both of their freezers. They had this freezer and they had this backup freezer. So they just moved everything to this, and this one was retired. But unless you have graphs like this, or you look at something more than just once a day, you may not catch these types of trends. Room humidity and temperature, again, usually stable, but I find that seasonally affected for sure. And is your current environmental system handling the temperature and humidity effectively? Do you still trust that one morning measurement? The recommendations, again, are 20 to 25 degrees C for your room temp, and then humidity 30 to 50. Is your lab staying there? Is it there at 8 o'clock, but is it there the rest of the day? Well, if it's anything like some of my labs that are in Texas and Florida, the answer is no. So this will be a room humidity, and you see it's all over the place. So depending, again, if you walk into the lab and you say, oh, I'm going to do that 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock measurement, you may say, okay, yeah, it was within range, it's fine. But, the rest of the day is complete chaos. And then this temperature shows that the HVAC or the environmental unit, or maybe AC for the building, is going off at night, taxing all the equipment in the lab, because it's definitely going into the alert temperatures over the weekends and at night when we're not working. So working hours, it seems to be totally fine, but so again, you would never know those trends unless you're tracking 24 hours a day. Just want to make you aware of that. Non-critical equipment, workbenches, warmers, water baths, usually stable, but again, affected, I think, primarily by what we do all day in the lab. So is this equipment keeping up with your repeatedly changing temperature request? You turn it on for your oocyte retrievals and your pickups, then you might turn it off to do an egg freeze, or to make, as people say, your dishes for the next day. I'm going to turn everything off because I need it to be, room temperature or cooler, so my drops, stay perfect and I don't have evaporation. So all of that on and off, what is it really doing? And are you really waiting enough time between procedures to do the next activity? Well, how do you know? I guess you can check the temperature when you start that. Are there any fluctuations, when you turn it back on? Like, again, are you waiting enough time to even know how that equipment is performing? So again, you could have slower warming recovery times. Warmer room temp for that day could equal a warmer bench temp. Are you keeping track of that? Maybe your room temp bench for oocyte cryo is fine at 8 o'clock, but when you took the QC measurement, but in the middle of Texas at 12 noon, that room is no longer, a nice 22, 23, maybe it's closer to 24, 25. Well, then what are you freezing eggs at? So are you taking another temperature measurement? Is there an alarm that's going to go off in your lab and let you know that bench is maybe a little bit warmer than you need it to be? So silent fluctuations in equipment function during critical procedures, this we know can affect maybe your gamete function, embryo development, and your pregnancy outcomes. So you definitely want to take advantage of 24-hour monitoring if you can. Workbench and warmer temperatures, again, 2 events. I have no idea, like from 6 to 8 a.m., this warmer completely spiked to this really high. I have no idea what they were doing from 6 to 8 a.m., or maybe nothing. Maybe this warmer just decided on its own, I'm going to be fine at 37, and then I'm going to spike all the way up to, 38 for hire on my own, just for no reason for 2 hours, but it did. Same thing here from 8 to 3. I'm hoping they maybe turn this off, but the reason I don't think it's off is because it went from 37 to 36. And you know, what did this? Did they add a cool media tube to it? You know, something they took out the refrigerator and they were trying to warm media for maybe, you know, oocyte, you know, freezing, or I have no idea. But again, this is a long trend from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. for it to be not set at 37, which is where they set it, to for it to just sit at 36 or lower, down to 36.6, you know. So again, you would never know these trends unless you're doing 24-hour monitoring. So to wrap up my final points, there are 0 cons to 24-hour monitoring. You want to choose monitoring dashboards that provide an admin overview of all locations if possible. All probe data can be accessible to lab directors, lab admin, QA directors, whomever you'd like to look over the data. You can develop SOPs based on equipment function and trends and identify the better equipment brands for your network. Maybe one brand outperforms another one. Maybe one just lasts longer than the other one, or maybe doesn't oscillate temperatures as much as another one. You can utilize the integration feature within the current Reflections QC software to automatically capture QC data. I greatly recommend this. I mean, when I say it is saving our labs so much time and effort, our larger labs really, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to go back to where they were with 3 or 4 people walking around capturing QC data. You can gain insight into laboratory equipment function, temp trends for certain procedures, optimize your lab workflow. Maybe you should keep one bench off all the time and keep one on. You know, just maybe it's not heating and cooling as fast or as you think it is for the next activity. Or plan for additional supporting equipment as needed, retire equipment, get a backup. Detect failing equipment before disaster. Again, I strongly suggest a thermographic cameras detect vacuum failures, and a probe system that has data graphs to depict silent trends that you wouldn't otherwise pick up. And I hope I've convinced you to maybe really consider 24-hour monitoring. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Hi, Jean. That was amazing. Thank you so much for your talk. Now, I do have a question before that I would like to ask you. It was from one of our participants, and they say if it's easy to link 24-hour monitoring with Reflections, the QC app, and does it populate the fields automatically to complete all the lab log?
Yes, it's super easy. Literally, all we did was contact Reflections. We worked with Mary Anna Reflections, and of course, you also want to contact the probe system that you have, or if it's incubators or whatever equipment you have. And so you want to make sure that they have an API, they have a system that can integrate. But it was super easy. Just talk to the equipment, the alarm system first, talk to Reflection second. They together worked on that, and it was the easiest thing ever. And then it's pretty much just setting up your reflection logs, making a few changes from manual to auto. As soon as you change it to that auto value and you change to that type of account in Reflections, it is very simple. So I think within, I mean, now, like I say, I pretty much manage that for my network, and in a matter of a day or so, I can get somebody switched from manual walking around to auto values pretty much overnight. So very easy. Highly recommend it. Several labs have done this, not just my network, but I haven't heard anyone say they want to go back the other way.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your response. We are going to save the rest of the questions for the Q&A section. And right now, we would kindly like to move on to the next speaker. So this next talk is sponsored by IMT Matcher. The speaker is original from Italy, but he's very recently living in Panama. So he has worked in a renowned IVF units, including the University Hospital of Naples, where he was the lead embryologist and manager of andrology section, ensuring adherence to regulation. He has an extensive expertise and now senior embryologist and scientific product expert at INT Matcher for the Americas. I give you, drum roll, Dr. Gianfrancesco Capuano.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to, who is following this webinar. I'm sorry, it seems that my camera is frozen. I will try to fix it during my presentation. Hopefully you can see my presentation. So the title of my presentation is Flying by the seats of our pants. So I was trying to, in the last few days, I was trying to find a good title for my presentation. I was talking with my colleague, and he said, all of a sudden, this expression, flying by the seats of our pants. I haven't a clue of what that means. I'm Italian. English is not my first language. So I was asking, what is this expression? He said that it was an expression originated from the early days of aviation, when basically pilots had to rely on their instinct and feelings rather than instruments. Well, now I must confess, I'm a big man, 6'2". That's my height. I'm a former rover, but I'm terrified on flying. So although I work with Matcher and I'm basically on international flight every month, I'm covering North and South America, I'm always flying. This refrain, flying by the seats of our pants, means that basically rely on our own, on our own ability. It could be exciting for someone, well, not for me, but it is also a risky way of doing something, because of course you can be as good as you want, but you have no backup. There is this survey, which is easily found online, done by the British Pilot Association, the BAPA, but 56% of the British pilots admit to have accidentally fallen asleep in the cabin. That's incredible. That's incredible. 29% of them say that basically when they woke, they found the other pilot also asleep. To me, this is terrorizing. What I want to say is that basically not to have automation in a lab, like in any other industry, it's incredibly dangerous, because basically you're not supposed to rely only on your own ability. So there is a way to reduce the risk of error, caused by, of course, the human factor. We need to try to reduce the human factor in any industry. And of course, we need to take control if something can, always can go wrong. So thankfully, well, today, all the air companies that, this is actually, for me, it's actually very important. All the air companies are not relying on their crews, to fly by the seats of their pants. So thanks be to God, they're doing the complete opposite. There is this other survey, the federal, you can see the logo in this slide, the Federal Aviation Administration. Basically, depending on the time of the day, there could be between 8,000 and 20,000 planes in the sky. And the real chance of one of them crashing is just probably 1 in 1.2 million. But what keeps the plane in the air and prevent collision is, of course, it's not the pilot, probably they're asleep, but automation, electronic system. So that's probably why we get on board. That's probably why I get on board. And I think that the same principle should apply to any other critical industry, of course, healthcare as well, and IVF. That's another funny example, if you can see, Castaway, which is one of my favorite movies. So probably everyone knows this movie. So probably if they are tracking up at that time, probably that movie wouldn't have been just 30 minutes long. We probably all remember the side story of, there was this FedEx parcel that in the movie represented the hope. Probably that parcel, you remember that washes ashore with the main character was Tom Hanks in the movie. So the remote island, nobody knew where it was. And then, happened what happened, the bowl, Wilson. But eventually that parcel was delivered. But just because the character, Tom Hanks, that in the movie was a hero. So basically he didn't lose the hope. But at least myself, I'm not Tom Hanks. We're not Tom Hanks, probably. We're not in Castaway. probably who is following this webinar is an embryologist, works in an IVF lab. So an embryo is not a parcel. So we can't just hope that the right embryo will be delivered into the right womb. Essentially, we can't rely on ourselves. So this webinar is around traceability. So what is traceability? According to the ISO, the International Standard Organization, traceability, I mean, is the ability to trace the history, the application, location of an entity by means of recorded identification, which is a brainy definition. In other words, it is a process of tracking and documenting the journey of a product. In our case, the quality of an IVF treatment. So from the beginning, from its origin to its current state, basically supply chain. So any industry is the same. IVF is basically an industry like another one. So that's a normal supply chain. And in IVF as well, traceability plays this fundamental role. So it comes into two essential forms. You can see in this slide, internal and external traceability. So internal traceability within an IVF center involves everything that is related to documentation and tracking of basically each patient treatment. So basically from the consultation room with the doctor to each single lab procedure. So all the process involved into the treatment, process map, embryo development, for example, if you think about the grading, the implantation. So basically every step must be recorded. The external traceability in any kind of industry, IVF as well. So it's everything that extends beyond the clinic. So it involves knowing the source, for example, the donor sample, eggs, sperm that we're receiving in our lab, the products that we're receiving. So everything that involved into a treatment that it's not directly, or at least 100% controlled by ourselves in the lab. So that's the external traceability. And of course, it is important too, and has to be tracked. So traceability is not just, important. It is crucial for every fertility center's total quality management. So we need to think about a system that is a total quality management system, and for many reasons. So a fertility center simply could not function and would not last for very long without an adequate traceability system in place. For example, a traceability system, it's important to improve efficiencies. And we know that, the efficiencies, it's important even to allocate the right budget to a specific area of our clinic. It's important to manage the risk, ensuring, of course, the patient safety, but I would say also the staff safety as well, which is not less important. It's important as well for, of course, quality control, assurance, compliance with the competent authority. But probably that's the most important part for the most important part for the patient, probably. Implementing with the proper system, a lab can mitigate the risk of errors and, of course, prevent mistakes. We have three big areas, I think, where traceability can be more than beneficial. Preparedness, basically, we need to prepare for a possible emergency. So with the proper system, we can have, of course, a better visibility into, we saw the supply chain in the previous slide. So we can actually have an insight in that supply chain and be better prepared if something goes wrong. Then the response, in case something goes wrong, because something can go wrong. So a good system can improve our agility in the response. But if this response is not adequate, we need to recover. We need to restore trust with the patient and with the industry. So the recovery basically can be done with a good traceability system. And that, of course, that can, help to rebuild trust with with everyone is involved in our treatment, in our clinic. So I think, I'm sure that all of us here who is listening would agree on the importance and the benefit of a traceability system. So I am assuming that there's no doubt of that. But implementing an effective and comprehensive system it's actually not that simple. It's rather complex and extremely difficult to achieve because of there's loads of challenge that we face. So we have loads of associations, ASHRAE, ASRM, that publish regular guidelines and code of practice. But I mean, my experience that there is still a general lack of standardization across the profession, especially when it comes to operating procedures. So I visited many labs for work. I told you I'm flying basically once a month, visiting loads of laboratories and fertility centers, especially North and South America. And I can say that's my experience, that there's no two clinics that operate in exactly the same way, even clinics that operate within the same group. So within the same group, we have the same clinic with different SOP. And standardize those SOP sometimes is not simple. Of course, we try to do that with Matcher, but that's a big challenge. So we have, of course, loads of limitation imposed by the authorities that can be related to data privacy, security. Of course, those limitations can be a burden. Sometimes can be a burden also different, regulation within the same country in different region. I mean, we all know that doing compliance sometimes is not simple to collect the data, improve, what we're doing in the lab. It is not just that. Another important challenge that it could be expensive to implement a lab with one of such a system. It is expensive, of course. IVF in general is expensive, not just for patients, but it is expensive as well for clinics and investors. So patients, for patients it is expensive, but actually we can say that that's what I would argue, that introducing a better traceability system save costs for patients and for clinic as well. So we need to find a solution, but what kind of solution? We have different kind of possible solution. One could be, of course, capture data manually. That could be, of course, a possibility. Loads of laboratories still basically handwriting on on the dishes and doing paperwork. But that's, to me, it is a very inefficient, difficult, and by far probably the most expensive way of implementing a traceability system in a lab. But why is it inefficient and expensive? Well, first of all, because it takes loads of time. We all know the refrain, time is money. Probably we all know there is the same refrain in every language. So we need loads of human resource to record and especially analyze data manually. And it's also prone to error. So you adopting a traceability system. If you're in the lab, basically a traceability system, a good traceability system can substitute one or two embryologists in a lab. Probably it's more important that if data is not captured in computer, in the software, it can be retrospectively compared to other data, which is basically makes it pretty much useless. Handwriting on lab sheet, that means that you need to analyze those data. It requires loads of time. So we might think that paper-based records and format are the cheapest way to collect data, but that's definitely not true in the long run. It is a false economy. So an example. So for instance, that's something very basic, labeling. So having an adequate labeling system, it is critical in an IVF lab. I don't know if you can see in this picture, this is like one of, this is called pocket matcher. So basically we can actually scan a label and extract the information from that show. So we can take a step back and just think about it just for a moment. So, and writing on a Petri dish, a test tube, or those small PCR tube that, we're using for the biopsy, a cryotop, wherever there is an extremely limited space, it is absurd. It is also dangerous. So that's just because the misreading of a critical information, of course, can bring to the wrong baby being born. So handwriting in IVF is basically asking for trouble. So sometimes I can even read my own writing. You can ask my colleagues. It is sometimes actually it's tricky to me to read my own writing. So to put this simply, so we need to capture data, and we need to capture data as much as possible. Preferably, we need to capture those data in real time, as the procedure and events are taking place in the IVF lab. So not retrospectively, and possibly we need to capture data in a way that can be easily tracked and traced and compared to the other data. So the integration of those data is the most important thing. So let's stress these concepts. So we need to record, store those data during the process as the treatment process happens. So we can have that's very important, to have an earlier identification of a potential issue. And so we can better improve the patient and staff management as well. So that means, of course, better decision making, because we can identify a problem as the problem happens. So we basically can, for example, know, I don't know how long will, even if it's not necessarily a problem, but just like a lack of training for an embryologist. I don't know how long will it take for an embryologist to perform, I don't know, an ICSI or an echolation. So we know in real time if we need to train more that person. So it's important not just for safety, but also for the staff. Loads of examples that are not IVF related. So one could be, for example, the fitness tracking app that we have, or our phone, or probably on your phone, because, well, I am a former rower, but at the moment I'm a very lazy man. So I don't have I don't do any kind of exercise, but basically, we have apps on our phone that I can track basically, I don't know, how many steps we did in a day, the heart rate, the calories burned in real time, how many miles we run, etc. Potentially we can do that manually. In theory, we can do that manually. So counting, let's think about counting each simple step that we're doing every day, checking our pulse while walking, probably talking with our friend. So in theory, it's possible. In practice, it's just not possible. It's impossible to cross-link those data in real time without automation. Because, there's too many data, and plus we can't be precise. And precision and accuracy in IVF are paramount. So in healthcare and in IVF are probably the most important thing. So ensuring traceability in IVF boils down what we call in Matcher the 5 rights. So what do I mean for 5 rights? So in the first instance, we have the right patients. Well, of course, it is better to start with the right one. We must be absolutely certain of the patient's identity, but this is actually quite unpeaceful. Next, we have the right time, and we know that timing is very important in all aspects of IVF and traceability. The time must be tracked for all the procedures, and probably we already know that on the paperwork, but it's actually more practical to keep those data in real time. Moving on, we have the right place. And we know that, IVF should only happen in a controlled and sterile environments. And that's also quite peaceful. We need to maintain the right condition. And that's crucial to minimize the risk and to improve our efficiency. Then we have, of course, the right procedure. They must adhere to our SOP. And of course, the right products. So we need to use the right one. So those 5 things, patient's identity, times, places, processes, product must be tracked. And that's, of course, I'm pretty sure that we all agree on that. But how? This is actually the big question. Many centers are already familiar with the use of the EMR, electronic management, those database. Sometimes they use the EMR also to invoice patients as well. Very practical. Other system that we're all familiar are, time-lapse, CASA, air quality, for example, monitoring system to track, of course, the temperature in the tank. But, we have also the electronic witnessing and traceability system. I work with Matcher. I think that probably it's 50, those kind of systems are available for 15 years now. However, among all of those systems, electronic witnessing and traceability is probably the least widely adopted. Our estimated Matcher that only around 5%, just 5% of the fertility centers have so far chosen to replace manual paper-based system and human double checking. So in my experience, the majority of the centers are located in North and Western Europe and North America. It is, to me, this is frankly surprising because an electronic traceability system can be used to address an issue immediately. We say root cause analysis. Basically, it's just a simple method of identify a problem in real time, a problem that can cause a failure in the process. So we don't have to double check paper-based records, knowing, I mean, if we had an issues after a week. I mean, we can recognize if we have a problem now in this moment. And that's actually, this is a good example of real-time data capture. So this is a process map, an interactive process map. You can see all those boxes, those are procedure of a process map. Basically, with automation, we can track in real time, you know, what procedure have been completed for these patients. We can track what are the next expected procedure, what are the products used in this procedure, because we can link the product to that specific procedure. So track, for example, if a product has expired, or for example, if anyone has override the procedure, or for example, made a mistake. So of course, sometimes we need to change. This is a process map, but sometimes we need to change the course of the treatment. Sometimes we need to deviate from our own SOP. IVF is complex, and every treatment, it could be different. A good traceability system like this one, I mean, has to be flexible, has to be highly configurable, and it will permit to do that. But has to record who made the change, when it was made, all the details and reason. So we say who, when, what, and where. So possibly we should also, if it's possible, we should also take pictures of the sample that you were working with. So we can have a photographic proof as well of basically any items. Everything has to be tracked and recorded. Another example on basically how automation can improve traceability. The lot management. So we all have experience to receive products lot in our lab, open in the box, check everything, and then put in the storage room. So everything can be automated. So you can see in this picture scanning, scanning like our products with this device that is, of course, is implemented with a special software. So we can track and trace in real time all the products we are receiving in the lab. We can using in our procedure, those products and check the products that we're using, including also drugs, surgical products, basically everything that is going in contact with patients, basically with their samples as well. Because how we can do that? So we can do that because we know that, in every product has a barcode. So using barcodes that already exist on basically every product, we are surrounded by barcodes. My screen is frozen, but I have, on my back, probably you can see an air conditioning. Even that one has a barcode on it. So we are surrounded by barcode, even if we don't know. So we're almost finishing. Barcodes are symbols that contain information that can be scanned electronically. I show you like that, the device that we can use in the lab. So just, to make it a little bit more, a little bit more dynamic. The barcode was invented by this guy, Norman Joseph Woodland, or patented in US in 1952. So the first product, that's just a funny information, ever tracked by a barcode was a pack of chewing gum in the 1974 in Ohio. So today, if I'm not wrong, nearly 50 years after, there's literally no products that doesn't have a barcode. So they're used to encode information, and we have two kinds of information in that symbol. So the key identifiers can be like a product code, a shipment code, a location code, and key attributes, a serial number, batch number, lot number, expiry dates. And of course, barcode is general, but not all the barcodes are the same. So the GS1 barcodes are the safest for healthcare industry. So GS stands, by the way, for global standard. We utilize this technology, and this is basically the barcode that we should use in healthcare. So GS1 system has been developed by this organization, the GS1, that guarantees that barcodes used in healthcare and so in IVF are globally unique. So for the peace of mind of the patient. So if you think for a moment, just for a moment, so GS1 barcodes are scanned 6 billion of times every single day to identify anything, a product, a process. basically it is impossible to have the same GS1 code adhered to two different things or person or process. So GS1 are the barcode that we should use in healthcare. And that's the end of my presentation. In summary, we can say that traceability in IVF has evolved along, of course, with the regulation from being almost a choice at the very beginning of the industry to an imperative today. So back in the years, the manual witnessing, traceability were considered sufficient. But today, in the modern IVF demand, I mean, we need a new approach. We need automation. So automation is no longer an option. It is essential. It is essential, of course, for precision, because as I told you, I mean, precision and accuracy is our goal in any treatment. Efficiency, of course, time is money, so we need to allocate the energy, in a better way. The integrity of our data for the compliance, for the regulation, and that's the end, of course, to improve the patient satisfaction and, of course, their trust. Thank you for following my presentation. If you have any question, if you want to send me an email, you can send an email direct to Matcher. And I don't know if you can, let me just try to.
Francesco, can you hear me?
Yeah, nice and clear.
Congratulations for your presentation. It was really, really good. Thank you so much for your time. Listen, I have a question for you. Okay, if I may ask. So you mentioned that we are using different systems to get the data in real time, like CASA, EMRs, electronic witness. But how do we do to get this system to talk to each other? So will not it be useful to integrate them all into the same database? How can we do that?
So this is actually something that it's not hard to do. It can be done in like few days, if not hours. So basically there is, in IT, there is this, software, these actually kinds of software called API, which is an application programming interface. So it works like a bridge. Basically, it works like a bridge that connects different databases, even totally different. You can connect, for example, like the witnessing system, even with an Excel sheet or, for example, any kind of EMR. It is potentially possible even let talk together, like witnessing system, traceability system, and I don't know, even the data, the data captured in real time from any kind of instrument in your lab. It works like a bridge. So a bridge that connects, translate two different language into the same area, and basically it integrates two different databases. It is very simple. It's been done in few hours, technically in few hours. So for example, with our system, with our traceability system, we already have loads of integration with loads of EMR. There's loads of EMR on the market. Integrate any system with with the traceability system. It is a matter of hours, basically. This is actually, because of course the most important thing today is like to need to connect to let those data to be integrated. The cross-link of the data is the most important thing.
Really good. Thank you so much, Francesco, for your answer. It was really, really helpful.
Thanks.
So let me introduce our next talk. So our speaker has spent the last few years as COO of the Fertility Partners, focus on helping our clinic partners achieve more by improving the experience, efficiency, economics, and effectiveness of IVF for their patients. He now is a transformation and value creation leader, focusing on making a difference in fertility. Here is Steve Rooks with the next talk.
Thanks very much, Edel, and I am truly honored to be presenting to you today. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your pipettes. Every time I have walked into an embryology lab, I am in awe and amazement at the magic that all of you do in the lab day in and day out. I never get bored watching an ICSI or a biopsy. And with all due respect to any REIs listening, the magic really happens in the lab. I hope today to help add to that magic by suggesting an approach to greatly reduce the workload variability that you typically experience in the lab, that I've certainly seen, because no two OPUs are alike. especially in terms of the workload they drive over the next 5 to 6 days. It does require some agreement and cooperation, though, with the REIs and the IVF coordinators, but that should be no problem, right? So first, I have no conflicts in this talk. I am advising on a gratis basis to MonCap, which is a PE fund investing in fertility tech, MB, which provides a patient experience and clinic efficiency system, Levy Health, and Cycle Clarity. Now, the data that you're going to see today is actual clinic data and trigger forecasting for the optimization I'll show that was provided by Dr. Jeff Gray and Dr. John Schnorr at Coastal Fertility Specialists and Cycle Clarity. And with that, let's move on. So does it occasionally feel like you're riding a roller coaster in the lab with peaks and valleys of intense stress and adrenaline and valleys of calm monotony? And are you like Mr. Bean in the front or the other two in the back as you ride that roller coaster? Well, you know, there's no question that clinics do plan their daily events to try to avoid that of OPUs, FETs, and thaws, as well as IVF, ICSI, checks, biopsies, and cryo. And many attempt to, you know, use rules of thumb to adjust their daily counts, such as peaking OPUs midweek to minimize weekend work and perform more biopsies and cryo at the start of the next week. However, it doesn't always work that way, since each OPU is unique in volume and in subsequent processing. It's a rare clinic, actually, that considers the likely number of eggs and embryos for each daily event. And that unique workload is generated, by each over the next 5 to 6 days based on the average setup and variable time per process step. You know, 10 OPUs on one Wednesday could be very different and drive a very different profile over the subsequent week than 10 OPUs the following Wednesday. This drives that daily variability that you see here. And as my good friend, Dr. Paco Arendendo will say to you, workload variability leads to time waste that can never be recovered to serve more patients. And as a manufacturing engineer, by initial education and experience at IBM, all too many years ago, I know the value of a granular rolling 3 to 4 week production plan that is optimized and managed to level load the operation and to eliminate this time waste that you're seeing here. Fortunately, as I was looking into this, you know, recent studies have shown that some of the procedures, and this is where the discussion with the REIs and the IVF coordinators will come in, but some procedures can be shifted by plus or minus a day. This has certainly been done by some studies looking at, you know, trying to avoid weekend work, but it needs to consider patient-specific factors where feasible, such as widening the trigger window given forecasted follicle development. This recent analysis you see here of SART data showed it was on fresh IVF ETs, but it does show a wider window than expected, around 10 days for the trigger without impact really on LBR. Furthermore, a recent study by Shapiro demonstrated that the highest rate of good quality blasts per puncture were for the 19 to why is this not working? 19 to 20.5 millimeter follicles with no substantial decline in good quality blast yield above that range. This implies that there is potential for some patients to delay or accelerate their expected trigger window under the consideration of the REI, to delay or accelerate their expected trigger window to both maximize the potential good quality blastocyst yield and to provide more lab workload planning flexibility. So, and being able to shift some procedures by plus or minus a day enables a forecast optimization to shift patient-specific workload from peak days to the valley days. And basically the approach involves, looking at and estimating the OPUs and the embryos through all the types of process steps that are being done, the counts, and of course, the standard times for setup and variable. And then considering based on the specific information, patient-specific information from the cycle monitoring, determine whether or not you can shift that event to both still provide a good outcome and enable that optimization of the workload. In the illustrative table, oocytes, estimates from the scans are used to forecast embryos, etc. And as per this graph here, and typically the greater the follicle count for a given patient and their development, the more likely an OPU can be shifted with minimal or no impact to outcome. But when you're able to do that, when you're able to shift procedures based on the patient-specific factors, and you can do this manually, actually, using the tool that I did it manually at first, and then I applied some optimization. You can do that to reduce the workload from this original 3 weeks of workload. And when we look at this, first, I would highlight a couple of key things. One, there's 2 measures of variability. There is the coefficient of variance, and this number really should be less than 10%. And that's basically the standard deviation divided by the mean, and I did it for the weekdays and the weekends. And the other measure is the total sum of squares, where you're taking the value for a given day and subtracting the mean for that period from it. And when we sum that all up, I get a number around 1,000 for this sample. And ideally, though, for this window, I'd want something around 100 to minimize that variation. And so by manually moving around patient-specific workloads on the spreadsheet I have, I was able to generate at least this first run. And to highlight again, what was 43 up here for coefficient of variance, I got down to 15 and down to 13% from 40, and from 1,000 down to 120. So you can see a significant reduction here in the workload by spreading it out, shifting it, in particular also working the weekends. And there is some movement, of course, to the next week and to the week before when you're able to plan with the right time frame. And then finally, however, by leveraging workload planning and optimization tools that are used in manufacturing that I'm familiar with, such as inter programming and optimizing the trigger and embryo forecasts, you can drive a much more significant reduction. So here is the version with the optimized tools that I use, the integer programming, where now the coefficient of variance for weekdays is gone from 43 to 6. It's dropped over 85%. And likewise for the weekend now, we're below the target for the weekend that had been set, and pretty much below around the target for the weekday. And the sum of squares has gone from 1,000 to 21. So you might look at this and think, wow, that's kind of nice. But the real value of this is that by leveling that workload, you can now reduce the stress on the embryologist. You can improve quality, and you effectively, if you're confident you're going to level that workload on an ongoing rolling 3-week basis, you can then target a higher workload target for the weekdays and the weekends, and still be confident that you're not going to be stressing the embryologists, midweek, etc. And then likewise having the occasional weekends where you've got a lot of work. So this has a big impact. And now I'd like to show you this in real time. It really helps to see it better if I show you on the spreadsheet. So just give me a second here. So again, here's the original workload over a rolling 3-week forecast here. Actually, this is rolling 3-week actuals. But based on which patients we could shift using the cycle clarity information, this was the manual result here. And then finally, the optimized. So significant improvement. I'm sure you'd all love to work in a lab where the workload is consistent day in, day out, and you're not stressed midweek and twiddling your thumbs here, or suddenly have a weekend where you have to work a lot. So that's it for me. And there's still some additional work that needs to be done with this. It was just something that I saw as a manufacturing engineer, as when I was working at the fertility partners, that I felt needed to be done, and I started to find ways of doing it. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. Steve, I have a question. I currently work in a very busy laboratory, so I was wondering, is this possible to be applied in a very busy lab setup? I mean, is there any other tools that we can use in order to improve the way we stimulate and trigger the patients? Maybe AI algorithms that can combine to your system and help us develop a nice system.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with Cycle Clarity right now. To be fair, there are other tools. A-Life is working on this. Fertile AI is also doing this. But the key, and that, as I pointed out, I did this manually for a portion of this. I did use some optimization tools. But even just having an Excel spreadsheet with each row is a patient specific piece of information, just having the ability to move those around, you can see the peaks declining. The key is starting off with a forecast for your upcoming patients in terms of their likely oocytes, and then knowing for your patients what that curve is in terms of the number of oocytes to 2PN to blasts, et cetera, and then determining, given the procedures for that patient, are you going to do day 5, day 6 biopsies and cryo? You basically work out a workload profile for each patient, and then you're basically shifting them around to level it. It's actually, you can do it manually, but the beauty of having a big patient base is that for you, it's actually easier to do that optimization. And it is something that the various players are providing, but it's something you can also at least do a reasonable attempt at manually on your own.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So are we ready for the Q&A section? Lodo?
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, I think that we are ready for the Q&A section, because I think we have a lot of questions to deal with. So thank you for all the questions that you sent. We got a lot. So I think this will be a very interesting session. So let's start with the first presentation, and the question for Jane. And so there is a question from Linda Margot from England. Is there a measurement of air quality, and which air purification device filter do you use, if any?
Oh, wow. So we have a network of about 22 different labs. So I would say probably a variety of HVACs. I mean, we have some that use local companies. So like, for instance, in San Francisco, where I am, York, which is a local company, but people use Zandair, Life Air, a variety. Really, I'm just looking at whether or not lab director supervisors are, following what we want to see as far as checking every, 6 months, 12 months, HEPA filter changes, positive pressure measurements. Are you doing your microbial swabs? Are you checking these items? Is that happening in your lab? And that's really what I'm monitoring. But I don't really necessarily lock them down to one company per se for a filter.
Do you suggest to monitor in continuous the air quality or not?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Do you suggest to monitor in continuous, day by day, the air quality? Because just to give an example, in Italy, we would like to, the inspectors would like to oblige us to check the contamination in our workstation every day, which is crazy.
You know,
I
we
don't know
do,
if
we wipe all of our, you know, bench tops down. There's products that you can do that's safe. You know, we definitely suggest that. We, you know, not many labs still use a UV, but some of them still do have the UV. They turn on for an hour or so for their benches. I really don't know of a lab that does this daily. I do have some labs that will stick a culture dish at the bottom of the incubator or in one of the incubator, you know, maybe it's the desktop type of thing, and they will actually look at that weekly to make sure there's no growth. But it's still weekly. It's a weekly, right?
It's accessible.
I don't know of anybody daily.
In Italy, it is asking daily. It's crazy because we need another lab to test the microbiology. You know, it's crazy. I'm fighting with the Ministry of Health for this.
I think. I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I just, you know, that's a lot.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Jean, from Betsy Cairo from USA. Are there studies that show a temperature shift in the tank via thermographic system and subsequent tank failure? If so, what percentage is accurate, or is it even tested?
Oh, that's a good question for the manufacturer, I think, of that system. I'm going to say that I don't know of another system or another way to catch a change in the surface temperature. So what this thermographic camera is doing is capturing a change in the surface temperature of this tank, which indicates that you're possibly headed towards a vacuum failure. Usually with the other probe system, it's still sitting at minus 196. There's no change in that. You know, you're not going to have a change in that until you boil off most of your liquid nitrogen, or you know, your probe is completely out of liquid nitrogen, so you're not going to know that temperature is changing on the outside of your tank, or that vacuum failure, you know, that liquid nitrogen is coming out enough to cool the outside of your temperature. So, you know, I'm not aware of what studies that might go with that. I just, that's how the system works. But I would say for most tank failures, most people have no idea until they see the frosting on the outside, you know, significant changes to their tank. Their probe alarms don't go off right away. But this system is literally telling you days before any of that happens, before frost, before anything.
Practically,
So,
we don't know how much time do we have between the shift in the tank and the total failure. So this is something that we need to study more, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that manufacturer could tell you more about that. I'm pretty sure they're probably conducting those studies and telling, because that's a very good question to know. I just know that I don't think there's anything else like that out there that's going to be able to predict. Yeah.
Amazing. So now jumping into the next question, this one is for Dr. Gianfrancesco, and we have it from Simon Lumsden from Newcastle, UK, and he asks, is there's a lot of talk about automation in art. What will be the impact of photo automation be on witnessing?
The impacts of automation and witnessing, but basically, I mean, the most important thing is that, as I try to show in my presentation, I think that the most important thing is to collect the data in real time. So, of course, we have, I mean, many kinds of, the impact could be, from the patient side, of course, the peace of mind of the patient, you have basically all the history of a treatment tracked and basically there in your system. From the clinic perspective, I mean, the time it cost saving of, you know, a treatment, because of course the implementing a lab with witnessing could be a little bit challenging, expensive at the beginning, but not that much. But in the long term, actually, I think that you're going to reduce the cost of basically any kind of treatment, because basically you need to consider that every time that we need to do the witnessing, we need to call someone else. I mean, every time we work in a lab, especially in the lab, we need to call someone else to do, you know, the double check. Sometimes they're busy sometimes, so that takes time, and even takes time to, how can I say, to extract the data, you know, all the time, putting together those data. If we don't think about just witnessing, but we think about traceability, we think that everything is basically tracked. All the single step that we're doing into the lab is basically tracked into the system. That's actually, for a laboratory, that actually saving loads of time and cost for the investor in the clinic. It is not expensive. It is not expensive to implement lab with traceability system. It is good for compliance, for example. If this is the question, the impact, it facilitates the work, the daily work of an embryologist. If you work in a lab, you know that basically the data is basically the most important thing. It's not the practical work. The most important thing is keep the data. Just try to follow, regulation, doing compliance. With a traceability system, of course, if we don't consider just, the witnessing part, in my company, we say we don't want to be just witnessing. We want to be a total quality management. And that's how a traceability system should be. It should cover all the aspects of the lab, having all the information, in a place. And if you need something, if you need to, when we say it in a supply chain, the information, the flow of the information has to be bidirectional. So I need to find out if there was an issue. In a second. I don't want to spend weeks before knowing that I had an issue.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry?
No, I was just saying that, I'm just completely you're completely right. I completely agree with you, It is just
for the patient's perspective, of course, it's for their peace of mind. And of course, this could be good also for the reputation of the lab. For the investors in the clinic, of course, using a traceability system, that means that you can allocate your energy in the lab to something else. So you can allocate your focus on something else, not just.
Yeah. So I have a question, Francesco, for you that is actually quite similar, and it's quite related to the one that you're talking. So basically, it's from Edel Rocher from Ireland. Hi, Carol, because we know each other. So she actually asked, first she said, for those already converted to electronic witnessing and full traceability, it's hard to imagine working in a busy lab without it, which is right. Of course, everyone that actually did work in a big lab, we already know that working without electronic witnessing is just a nightmare. So the question that she has is what would you say are the advantages of Matcher over the other systems like RFID? And is product tracking in Matcher linked to the data or cycle type of the procedure or down to level of the individual witness points?
What did you say, the last one?
So basically, she wants to know if product tracking is linked to the procedures, which I think you know for that one.
Okay. If we talk about Matcher, of course, Matcher has loads of functionalities. It's not a witnessing system. RFID, of course, is a different technology. They use tag. Barcodes, we know everything about tag. For example, if you think just for a second that, if you want to work in liquid nitrogen, you need to use tag, even other companies, even with other technology. If you want to track your samples in the liquid nitrogen, you need to use barcodes. We don't have enough data on RFID in general, without talking about other companies. She was asking about Matcher in particular.
Yeah.
With Matcher, we're not talking just about witnessing. We talk about, as we say, total quality management. We have also the proof, the photographic proof, which is actually that it's not less important. So I would choose a barcode system over an RFID because it's just more complete. And plus we have, that's actually something even more important for probably, that we have just one entry point. So we need to consider that every time that we're using a tag, the information of that tag is basically, there's no information, it's basically blank. So we're going to baptize that, that tag one, we're going to put that tag into, our workspace. A barcode has a previous information basically loaded into that, into that symbol. And we can put in all kinds of area of our lab. Regarding the product, basically every time that we're doing a procedure, we can link. So we want to be like a total quality management system, not just witnessing. We want to, of course, so we want to know also what kind of products we're using. We can link, I think that was the question. We can link the product to a specific procedure. So that means that every time that you're using, that product, the product will, the system will know that you're using that product for that procedure for that patient. And even, for example, if the company after, I don't know, will say, okay, there was a product with that lot, you should be able to cross-link those data. So you should be able to know if that product, that specific lot was used for, I don't know, was used with, the patients into your lab. So basically link the product with the procedures. And of course, that means with patients as well.
Okay, Steve is raising his hands.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one. I don't know if Francesco mentioned this, but since Matt and George aren't on the call, I can go ahead and say this. I've been talking to them forever about adding inventory management as an overall capability. You're doing traceability, you got barcodes. I come from manufacturing where that kind of system is used completely for inventory management. And I want to see the labs get to automated, inventory ordering and replenishment and tracking and all that. And that would be phenomenal. I'm sure I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding, but yeah, I keep telling George and Matt, you got to focus on adding that. And they didn't say that they were going to look at that, because that is a key function.
Wow.
Embryologists are too valuable to be doing inventory. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. That's why it's time saving. I mean, we need to allocate our energy in something that is more meaningful for the treatment, for the patient, for the clinic.
Exactly.
That's actually, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I have another comment and also question to Gianfrancesco, because he said that we need to track whatever we do in our lab, and also this is important for reputation, for investors, managers, and patients. So I focused my curiosity in the last years on safety of vitrification. So I must declare that I have a conflict of interest, as you have in the matcher. So, but what about the traceability of the liquid nitrogen bath that we are using? I mean, what about the traceability of the box we are using? Because in some cases we are declaring that we are cleaning this box. So I think we need to personalize this. I always do this example of the ice cream. In Italy, we love to eat the ice cream. Let's imagine that we tell to our patient that they are eating an ice cream with a cup used for another customer, by another customer. Yeah. This is what is happening in our labs today. We always use the dirty polystyrene boxes. So what's your opinion about this?
Well, actually, I totally agree with you. There's always way to implement a system that actually I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific answer for that. That's actually quite advanced. But actually, yeah, the quality of the liquid nitrogen that we have, the box of the liquid nitrogen, this is something that actually it can be for sure implemented. We can have a chat on that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, amazing. And I would like to ask a question for Steve, and we have it from Andrew. Hi, Andrew. I know Andrew Thompson from Wales, and he says, in terms of what Jean is stating with performing lab QC checks, maintenance, etc., as well as frozen discards, where's the place for that in Steve's optimization chart? So it's an interesting
question. And since I know
question.
Andrew well, I'd say you have to add coffee breaks in there too. The reality is, as a workload management tool, you could easily add on a certain amount every day based on volume and or based on a fixed amount for QC, et cetera. So it could be just part of that bar chart that says, okay, every day I'm devoting 1 hour of embryology time to these other tasks. And that becomes part of the optimization to say, okay, in this lab, we're targeting, you know, in Eros's lab, it might be like 70 embryology hours per day. And, you know, 2 of those are for, you know, things like this. So it's an easy thing to work into this modeling approach.
I have a question for Steve.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Steve, from Philip Chan, with the optimization of your workflow, do you see a decrease in live birth rate or even on the number of the embryos available for freezing?
Well, this is the whole purpose of using, you know, again, you could do this with just opinion, but ideally you want to use a good tool that is forecasting the right trigger window and how much flexibility you have there. That's one of the things I didn't really go into detail in that there was a good 40% of the OPUs that is part of the optimization I wasn't going to move because it was going to impact LBR. But again, with any of these systems, whether it's cycle clarity, A-life, et cetera, and their analysis of follicle development and looking at hormone levels, you could say, okay, these OPUs over the next 3 weeks, I can move them plus or minus a day without measurably impacting LBR. And again, as I was saying, it's typically those with higher follicle counts are likely to be able to more flexibility. But there are going to be, you know, with the low follicle counts, et cetera, you don't want to move those. If the right day is, you know, September 13th, you're not going to move it from that day. That's going to become a constraint that doesn't move. So that's how you work this in. The goal is not to impact LBR, it's to ensure equal or better.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Steve, I really loved your presentation, and I would like to show some of your slides to my doctors in order to show them how we can optimize the workload. But so one of the big problems that we have is the availability of embryologists and all the staff, nurses on the weekends, and also the cost of staffing on holidays. So how can we, you know, balance this?
Well, as you saw, this model is flexible enough to say, okay, you put the constraint that on these days, whether it's the weekend or it's a holiday, in your rolling forecast, you say the maximum amount of embryology hours I want on those days is X. And the optimization basically has that as a constraint. And the goal then is to shift workload around to drop it down. I don't know if you recall, but the original workload actually had some peaks above their target. They were targeting, that lab was targeting 8 like 1 embryologist or 2 embryologists for 4 hours on each weekend. And there were a few times where it really went above that. Well, the modeling allowed me to drop it down. So you can allow for weekends and holidays in this approach.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question actually for Jean now. Jean,
Okay.
are you there?
Yes.
Perfect. So basically, I have different questions. I have lots of them. So I'm going to choose the one from Philip Chan. So the question from Philip, it says, do you monitor for oxygen levels in your cryo storage rooms? I noticed that you did not mention room O2 levels as critical.
Okay, yeah. So we do, our probe system does have an oxygen sensor. It was in the list, but I didn't, yeah, you're right. I didn't provide a example of what could happen with the oxygen sensor, but we do have oxygen sensors that are available, and they do hook into the dashboard, so you can get alerts from those. And it is definitely critical. It is a CAP requirement that you have an oxygen sensor and a monitor anywhere you have dewars, liquid nitrogen storage supply, anything with liquid nitrogen, any working areas, unloading, you name it. So that is critical, and you want to monitor any of those areas. Also, interesting enough, we've been retiring a lot of dewars and replacing them with larger tanks. And even with that whole entire process across all of our labs, we actually had people come in and do a reassessment of those storage rooms. You know, what is the air venting system in there? Does it allow us to have larger tanks? And you know, what is going to be the oxygen in that room, and how much nitrogen is going to be in that environment when somebody opens a larger tank to fill it versus a smaller dewar. So it is indeed critical.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I guess we have time for one more question, and I would like to ask this for Dr. Gianfrancesco. And there is a question from Hazar. And what is the perfect labeling system when then the correct one without any mistake?
With any mistake, well, of course, the basic information, of course, an ID of the EMR, of course, an ID of the EMR, demographics. Most important thing is the labeling, the labels. Not talking about the information on the labeling because that's customizable. But the most important thing is the label. I was thinking, I don't know, probably most of us know that, you know that we can't wear perfume in our lab, no? I mean, nobody can wear perfume because of volatile organic compounds. I always thought about that, but using, you know, everyone is using the Sharpie on the, you know, on our dishes. And Sharpie, you know, those markers are basically made with alcohol. So using that dish into the incubator, we have air quality system in the lab. So we're not allowed to use perfume, but we're going to, you know, to use the Sharpie on most of the laboratories, you know, on the dishes, and put then the dishes into the incubator. So a good labeling system has not to be toxic. So we don't want our labels to be toxic in the incubator. Of course, labels that are not for cryo use. And then we need to have the good labels for the liquid nitrogen. I mean, in the liquid nitrogen, one of the things, for example, we should use labels that are overlapping. So we don't want that those information are lost. And of course, they need to resist to the high temperatures, for example, for a PCR, and low temperature in liquid nitrogen. So nearly, negative 200 and plus 100. So that's a labeling system. Regarding information, of course, barcodes. All the information that we want can be basically extract from a barcode, but also we need to see with our eyes. So we can't rely just, on technology. We want to, as we can't rely with you just on human, we can't rely just on technology. So we want to see also the demographic of the patient. So not toxic for, especially for the incubator. We're not going to use alcohol, so that has to be tested for VOC and of course they need to resist to low and high temperature for the cryo. That's my idea in general. I'm not talking about any system. That's in general.
Okay, so amazing. I think this webinar was very, very interesting, very least for me. So I think time has come to close this webinar, and I would like to thank all who took part to this webinar, particularly my friend Eros, but also the ladies Michelle and Edel, and of course the presenters. So Jan and Gianfrancesco and Steve. I think that after their presentation, we will have better labs because they give good suggestions and also topic to be considered, and for sure there are something that we need to think about. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And also, let's not forget our team from I3. Thanks for the organizing committee of this initiative, I3, who are Drs. Jocks Cohen, Peter Nagy, Marianne Zatevis, Thomas Elliott, Fran Fred Lyle, Giles Palmer, Violet, Azora, and special thanks to IVF QC, the Reflections app, and IMT Matcher for kindly sponsoring the talks on today's session. And we want to stay close to you, so please tell us what your topics are. What is it that you guys want to hear? Remember that we have the podcast and all webinars are going to be uploaded free on our website. Just visit www.ivfmeeting.com. Our next session will be on October 3rd, and it's going to be all about surrogacy. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.